Good afternoon, everybody. Pigskin Pete here. Back to finish up these college football fantasy draft videos for 2018. You've heard the saying, I'm going to save the best for last. Well, not this time. I saved the worst for last. I saved the Pac-12 for last. Now, everybody knows I'm not a huge fan of the Pac-12 West Coast teams, but I'm trying to be as objective as I can in these videos. The fact of the matter is, aside from a lot of the superstars, Khalil Tate, Jake Browning, Gaskins, Bryce Love, the household type names, there's not a lot of players in the Pac-12 that I know. And I learned some things when researching these players today. Now, to be real here, it was hard to find elite talent at some of these positions, and that's just me being real. And that's not just my sentiments. You go research these players after I give them to you, and you're going to see the same thing from sports writers, not just on the East Coast, but West Coast sports writers too. There's just some very, very big talent gaps at some positions between the Pac-12 and the rest of the country. All right, let's get it started. You guys should know how this works by now. 1 quarterback, 2 running back, 3 wide receivers, a defensive end, a linebacker, and then a defensive back, either a cornerback or a safety. Start with the quarterback. 2 obvious picks this year in the Pac-12. 2 completely different quarterbacks too. I wanted to go with Jake Browning because I think he's the best quarterback in the Pac-12. Certainly the best passer. And I think he's going to have a huge year and probably win the Pac-12 with him leading that team. Now, I didn't pick him. I picked Khalil Tate. Now, like I just said, I don't think Khalil Tate is a better quarterback than Jake Browning. I think he's just more dynamic. He's on the Heisman watch list for a reason. His passing stats, when you look him up, are terrible. I mean, like 55% completion percentage, not single-digit touchdowns, I think, maybe 9 or 10 touchdowns last year. Pretty bad. But he did have 1,400 yards rushing last year, and I want to say 12 or 14 rushing touchdowns. That's like those are running back numbers. So he's not, like I say, he's not going to light the stat sheet up through the air, but he puts up video game type numbers on the ground. So I'm going with Khalil Tate. Next, we'll do the running backs. These are easy peasy. There's no debate here. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on these guys. First one would be Myles Gaskin out of Washington. He is arguably the best pure running back in the Pac-12, and of course Bryce Love is a all-around back, and of course Bryce Love's gonna be my second one I take for obvious reasons. I'm picking him to win the Heisman. Will that happen? Who knows? He's going to New York though, as long as he can stay healthy. Definitely one of the most dynamic players and fun players to watch in the country. But back on Myles Gaskins real quick. He's had 3 straight 1,000-yard seasons or more. Pretty impressive. So he'll be a senior this year. And then as far as Bryce Love goes, I'm not going to even get into it. It speaks for itself. All right, so the first wide receiver I'm taking, a guy named N'Keal Harry Jr., plays for Arizona State. So last year he was a freshman, had almost 700 yards receiving and 5 receiving touchdowns. Doesn't sound like really great numbers when you compare it to other conferences, and that's the problem with the Pac-12 right now. Is, like I said, I mean, they do have some really good wide receivers, but compared to every other conference, well, mainly the Big 12 and the ACC, and even the SEC, it's not anywhere close. He did, however, receive freshman All-American honors last year, so he's a great player. He'll probably get a lot better this year. I expect him to have over 1,000 yards. We'll see what Herm Edwards does over there at Arizona State. That ought to be a very interesting thing to see play out, and how he's going to utilize what talent they do have there, which isn't a lot. Next, a young man named J.J. Arrega-Whiteside, wide receiver out of Stanford. Something interesting about this guy has nothing to do with football, but he's from Spain. I was going to say he's Spanish, and people, especially dumb white guys, hear Spanish and they think it's every brown person in the country, or in the world rather. No, he's Spanish. He's actually from Spain. So you don't see that a lot. You don't see a whole lot of European players playing at a high level in college football. It's more, you see more Americans than anything in football. So anyway, I just thought it was interesting that the guy's really from Spain. But last year he had 800 receiving yards and 9 receiving touchdowns. And not to mention, he plays on the same team as Bryce Love. And so that's going to be a pretty good offense there with this guy and Bryce Love. The quarterback's pretty good too. So Stanford could give Washington a run for their money. I know that's not breaking news or shocking news to anybody. Those are the two best teams in the North. Or we don't know about what Oregon's going to do, but anyway, this kid's good. Definitely the top 3 wide receivers in the Pac-12. Last one I'm taking, wide receiver out of the University of Southern California, Tyler Vaughns. Biggest problem with this receiving core this year is going to be the fact that they don't have Sam Darnold throwing them the football. So I know that I've heard from some USC fans that are saying that the guy who's coming to take, well, I think there's a quarterback battle, but the one they think is going to take Darnold's place is a really good quarterback. And I don't doubt it. I mean, USC has a history of churning out some really, really good quarterbacks. So now I just self-admittedly don't know anything about the guy who's going to replace him. I mean, I could sit here and lie to you and said that I studied USC's roster for 2 hours. I didn't, okay? So I'll learn more about it this year as the season goes on and I'll watch some of the games. Until then, I'm not going to invest a whole lot of time in that. I don't take USC seriously as a team. That's the main reason. I will, however, watch some of their games, and I will watch some of their primetime games especially. Last year, Tyler Vaughns, 700 yards receiving, 5 touchdowns. Not great, not terrible. I think he'll do better this year, despite the fact that they don't have Darnold. Next, defensive end. Now that we're getting into the defensive positions in the Pac-12, I was shocked because we all think of what's the worst defense conference in the country. We automatically think Big 12. No, if you thought that, you're wrong, just like I am. The Pac-12 last year was last in virtually every important defensive category as far as comparing them to other conferences, and it wasn't even close. The Pac-12 was terrible defense last year. And you can't say, the Big 12 makes the excuse that they have such great offenses, top to bottom, that skews the stats and makes their defenses look bad. That might be true to a certain extent. You can't say the same thing about the Pac-12. Yeah, there's 3 or 4 good offenses in the Pac-12, but the rest of them aren't any good. So the fact that they are so bad, it was hard to find great players to put on this list. I'm just being real here with you. Now, there's a couple that are really good, but like I said, compared to other conferences, it's very, very slim pickings. But this defensive end, Jalen Jelks at Oregon, pretty good player. Last year, 7 sacks, 15.5 tackles for loss. Like I said, again, not lighting the world on fire, but still in the Pac-12, one of the best, if not the best. Now, I know there's some other ones out there. There's the guy from Utah. I can't think of his name. There was 2 or 3 defensive ends that I was choosing between, and they were all similar in stats. And it's like I said, these defensive players are really hard to pick. So I'm sure if you're a Pac-12 fan out there, you're going to tell me, well, probably not just this position, but all of them, that I'm getting them wrong. I'm not picking necessarily the best players, the number 1 player at that position for this draft. I'm looking for stats more than anything, and the tackling is so bad out there. You don't see a lot of guys with huge numbers of sacks and things like that, like you do in the ACC and in the Big Ten and in the SEC. So it's confusing. But so in this situation, I like to go to more veteran guys who have solid stats and solid careers, and that's why I'm going with him. Linebacker. This was a really tough one, really slim pickings here. I went with a guy named Peyton Pueller out of Washington State. Now, last year, he got hurt, I think, in the 3rd game of the year, and so he missed basically the entire season. He's fully healthy. He's going to come back and lead that team. He's going to be a senior. From what I'm reading online about him is that a lot of praise, that he's going to be really, as long as he stays healthy, that he's going to be really good and probably lead the Pac-12 at the linebacker position this year. So just going off of what I'm reading, what people who follow the Pac-12 are saying, I'm going to go with their intuition because I have no idea. I'm sure there's guys out in the Pac-12 linebacker position that played great last year, and obviously this guy didn't play last year for the most part. So you're You're going to tell me, how can I pick a guy who's coming off an injury, this and that? Well, I'm picking him. Get over it. And last but not least, possibly the worst position in all of the Pac-12, defensive back. I picked a cornerback, Nate Meters, out of UCLA. Stats, not great. But when I looked up the top players at that position coming back from last year, there may be some freshmen coming in that'll be good. I'm not going, if anybody's a true freshman, I'm not putting them on my list because I want to have something to refer to. I want somebody who's coming back from last year. And I got to tell you, I couldn't find a good stat sheet for cornerbacks in the Pac-12, or at least what I would consider to be good. So, unless I missed one, I don't know what to tell you. I feel like that like Clemson, I consider Clemson's weakness to be the defensive backfield. I feel like our third string cornerback could put up the numbers that these guys are putting up in the Pac-12. So, it's not a knock on I know it sounds like it. It's not really a knock on the Pac-12. It's something that they need to improve in. And this is why they are considered to be the weakest conference in football right now. I don't want to talk about 10, 15, 20 years ago when you had USC, mainly USC, but there were some other really good teams out there. Right now it's very, very top heavy, and it goes from above average to borderline great teams to a huge drop off to terrible. There's not really an in-between there. So it'd be interesting to see how the Pac-12 plays out this year. And as far as my fantasy draft video today is, I learned some about the Pac-12, but really I was hoping to find some diamonds in the rough there where I could kind of prop them up, and it just didn't happen. Outside of the dynamic offensive players like Khalil Tate, Myles Gaskins, Bryce Love, the rest of the Pac-12 is looking pretty abysmal, in my opinion. So anyway, that concludes my college football fantasy draft videos for the 5 conferences. It was a lot of fun doing this, just for the reason to get to look into some of these other conferences and learn some things about some other players that I may have not really known a whole lot about. So I gained a little bit of knowledge, but I'm still really dumb. Have a great day. Pigskin Pete, checking out.